Okay. Right, sorry. We're going to be talking now about building the future, sustainable infrastructure for a greener economy, and delving into exciting realms of sustainable construction, the importance of energy-efficient design, renewable energy integration, and the role of cutting-edge technologies. And with us today, we have Ricardo Angel, who I will welcome to the stage, who is CEO and Managing Partner at Piva Capital. Ricardo, very nice to meet you in person.
Good to see you, good to see you.
Hello.
Katrina, they may want us to switch chairs, that's what they told me.
Do they want us to switch?
Because your name is going to be on this side and then my name is going to be over there on the screen.
Oh, I didn't know that. Sorry, it's because I'm left-handed, so I look to my left.
Their idea, not mine.
Anyway, there we go. So, welcome, Ricardo. So, I'll just wait until we sort of get a few more people coming into the room.
I think it's getting emptier right now.
Yes.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, really good. And you?
Full day so far?
Full days. Yeah. And raining in Madrid, so unusual. I mean, hello. But it makes a nice change. And have you seen much of South Summit today? Have you been enjoying?
Yes. I went to a couple of sessions earlier and met a couple of interesting people. So pretty good so far.
Excellent. So you're already networking?
Already, always. Always.
Always networking?
Always, yeah. It's part of the business.
Yeah? Okay,
Yep.
so Ricardo, let's talk about, for example, let's talk about Piva. You're CEO and Managing Partner at Piva Capital, and you bring more than 25 years of operational and investing experience in the energy and industrial sectors. You were sort of managing partner at GE Ventures, where you led origination and investments in energy, oil and gas, industry, and natural resources. So, tell us a little bit about your journey into Piva Capital.
Yes. So my journey is a little different from most people, but then again, everybody's journey is a little different. I'm originally from Colombia. That's the accent. I actually moved to the States, and I went to school in the States. I'm an engineer by training. Did engineering just in school. Once I graduated, I went into management consulting. I did that for a few years, and then I decided I wanted to do something more financially oriented. So went back to school, got an MBA, did investment banking in New York for Goldman Sachs for a little while, and then decided to do venture capital. And so I've been doing venture capital for the last 21 years. I started this in 2002 when it was less fashionable than it is now. I worked with Chevron, the large energy company, in the venture capital group for about 5 years. And then when General Electric was getting their venture capital going, I joined the team. I was the first person in the venture capital team in Silicon Valley, third person in the team. And we grew that team to what later became GE Ventures, and I was there in total for 11 years before I started Piva.
Okay.
Yep.
So tell us about Piva. So Piva is a technology fund investing in breakthrough tech that's going to disrupt. You invest in people, companies, and breakthrough technologies. Can you sort of tell us about, the technologies you invest in? Sure.
And so the way to think about Piva, as Katrina mentioned, is that we're a VC firm looking to invest in breakthrough technology companies that are going to disrupt industries broadly defined. And so we're thinking about going after companies, after industries like construction, industries like energy, mobility, fashion, and so on. Industries that have not really been disrupted in many decades at some point. Our discussion is about sustainable construction in a green new world. And so as part of what we do, we're thinking about investing all the way back to the fundamental materials that you actually need to use to build the infrastructure of the future. And so just to give you a couple of examples, we have invested in a company called Boston Metal, which is looking to electrify the way you produce steel. And so steel is used everywhere, in every building, just about around the world. Steel produces about 8% of all the greenhouse gases in the world. 8% is just huge, right? If it were
Yeah.
to be a country, it would be the third largest country in the world. And still it's about 1.5 to $2 trillion business. So it's a huge business,
Wow.
a huge polluter. And so if you were able to disrupt this industry, right, the way I think about it is that it could be very, very good financially because you're going to be able to produce a better product, hopefully at a lower cost. And at the same time, it's going to be a more sustainable product. And so you're doing very well, and at the same time, you're doing a lot of good. So steel, going back to steel, we invested in a company called Boston Metal. And what they're looking to do is to electrify the way you produce steel. And if you're able to power these operations with renewable power, you will be able to potentially offset all of that 8% of greenhouse gases in the world. So that's huge. So that's steel. The second, after water, the second most used material in the world is actually cement and concrete.
Okay.
Cement and concrete is also 7 to 8% of all the greenhouse gases in the world. It's also a multi-trillion-dollar business. And so there are a number of companies trying to figure out how to make cement cheaper and greener. And so we invested in the company that we think is going to be, the winner, but there is room for multiple winners. And so what this company does is that they actually are able to produce cement at a much lower carbon footprint. And not only that, but they're also able to produce concrete that has better mechanical properties as well as a lower cost, right? So it seems like a no-brainer. And now the technology is now proven. Now we need to scale it up to make sure that it's available, hopefully everywhere over time. But it takes time. It takes, the way I think about it is that these, as you think about these products and then processes that are going to be required for construction, these are processes that usually are run on software. But the equipment that produces all these products, these are very intensive hardware-centric businesses.
Okay.
And
so when you talk about technology, can you explain how, like, for example, technology in, making cement or technology in building steel to make it more sustainable? Can you give examples of that? What are we seeing in terms of, how it's changing, how it's progressing?
Yes. So on the cement and concrete company that we invested in, and there are a few out there, the company that we invested in is actually, they have a new process to produce cement, right? So it's lower temperature. They use a couple of different materials to produce high quality cement. And so then you have this powder, which is the cement, right? And that's one of the elements that you use to actually produce concrete, right? So if you think about the concrete that goes on the floors, right here, right? Or it goes in buildings, or it goes in schools, right? Concrete, the things that come in the big dump trucks, right? In the big trucks that actually put the concrete. Concrete has cement. It has also aggregate, gravel, sand, and it has other chemicals like fly ash, right? And so what Solidia is doing a few things. Number one is that they're able to produce cement with a much lower carbon footprint and cheaper, number one. Number two is that when they actually take the cement and put it into concrete, they're able to cure the concrete with CO2. So as opposed to cure it with water, right? Typically you cure concrete with water, and it takes 28 days for the concrete to really harden. When you cure concrete with CO2, actually a few things happen. Number one is that it cures in 1 day, right? And so if it cures with 1 day, that's a lot of good for your productivity in the field, right? So it cures with 1 day. The other thing is that the product that you actually are able to produce, the concrete, is denser. And when concrete is denser, that means that it has better properties better properties in terms of like compression strength. and it also has better properties in terms of weatherability. In the States or in northern countries where you have a very heavy winter, right? Sometimes actually the coal, the water, the salt gets into the concrete, and over time the concrete decolors, and also it starts to wear out, to erode, right? So this cement, this concrete actually is denser, it has better compression, and better weatherability capabilities. So
Okay.
it's a better product, greener, and same cost or cheaper.
Right. So, how can we ensure that these sustainable infrastructure projects are accessible and affordable in terms of, for all communities? How, we talk about sustainable products. Are they just as affordable in terms of using them?
They are, and so I should say they will be. Like in every company, when you're getting going, the costs are expensive when you're producing in small volumes. The idea, and right now this is where we're at with companies like Boston Metal and Solidia and many other companies like this, right? They're at very small scales, so they're a little expensive because they're not producing that much. So that's when people like us come in. We provide capital to these companies to help them grow, right? So when we come in, we usually come in rounds where these companies are raising 30, 50, $100 million of capital to be able to scale up their operations.
Okay.
As you scale up the operations, you're going to be able to then get economies of scale. So the costs are going to be coming down. So the idea is that when we invest in these companies, the idea is that without any incentives, these products should be just as good as existing products. They usually are better products. They have better performance, and the cost should be the same or hopefully lower. And so right now in these products that I talked about, they're scaling up. They're accessible only in certain locations in the States, but over time, the idea is that they're going to grow and be available everywhere in the U.S. and around the world.
Right.
But that's going to take time.
Sure. So you've talked about, you set up two funds, for example. One fund which you've closed, and then another one which you're in the process of building. Can you sort of talk about the projects that you're investing in? You talked about steel and cement. What else are you investing in?
Okay. So I started PIVA in 2019, and we closed Fund 1 in 2019. It was a $250 million fund. And the three segments that we in particular invest in are, the first one is called the future of industry. And this is, we invest in companies that have to do with artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, logistics, supply chain, and so on. So these are horizontal type of technologies that can be used in every industry to make their operations greener, safer, more efficient, more economic, cheaper.
Okay.
So that's the first theme, right? The future of industry.
Yeah.
Then we have a couple of other themes which are more specific to specific industries. We call one the future of energy and mobility. So in the future of energy and mobility, we're going after things like energy efficiency, energy storage, things like hydrogen, even things like fusion, which we think are going to be needed over time.
Yeah.
And then on the mobility side, anything from planes, trains to automobiles is pretty broad. That's theme number 2. And then the last theme that we go after is the future of materials and production.
Okay.
So as we have things like I mentioned, cement, concrete, steel. We're also investing in food, in agriculture. We're looking into the fashion industry, and so on. So it's pretty broad. So in Fund 1, we invested in 13 companies throughout those 3 segments that I mentioned. And we also closed on our Fund 2 last year. And Fund 2 is another $250 million. And so that's where we're at. Right now, we're investing out of Fund 2. We have 4 companies invested out of Fund 2 and looking for other great companies that are trying to change the world to invest in.
Okay, good. So, and what do you sort of see in terms of the sort of future of sustainable infrastructure? How are we sort of building a greener economy and sort of generally? What's your sort of view on
it's So part of if you think about the greener economy, right? If you think about right now and throughout COVID, a huge concept came up, which was the net zero by 2050. And so now many countries around the world, hundreds of companies around the world have signed up to be able to achieve net zero by 2050. That's a huge undertaking. And so I don't think anybody actually knows how we're going to get there, but I can tell you technology and innovation are going to be part of the solution. And so when you think about specifically about infrastructure, I think about it in a few different ways. So number one, how do you build it? How do you build greener infrastructure?
Yeah.
And so, I mentioned a little bit about, well, you need greener materials, greener steel, greener cement and concrete.
Yeah.
You also need to have greener processes to manufacture, to build, to construct. And so we're looking into a number of companies that are thinking, that are developing ways to do that. But that's very tricky to invest in because construction is very localized. And the way you build a building in Spain is a little different from the US, and it's a little different from Colombia.
Right.
And so we haven't found the silver bullet yet, but we will find it, and I hope, right? So one is, how do you build a greener infrastructure?
Yes.
Then the next idea that comes to mind is, how do you actually power a greener infrastructure? And that's very difficult to do, right? And so right now in the US, there is a lot of natural gas, there's a lot of coal, and there's a lot of renewables coming up. Over time, especially if you want to get to a greener, at net zero by 2050, renewables have to be a lot larger in terms of a percentage of power generation. Just in the US, just in the next 7 years, 59 coal-fired power plants are going to be retired. And so coal fire is base load.
Yeah.
And that's going to be replaced by solar and by wind, which is great. I love renewables. The issue with renewables is that they only work when there is sun or when there is wind.
Yeah.
And so as you retire all of these 59 coal-fired power plants in the US, you're going to need to replace them by solar and wind, plus energy storage. Long duration, large scale energy storage to make sure that the grid is stable. And so I'm very excited about that theme about long duration, large scale energy storage. There are a number of companies trying to solve that problem. One of the companies that we invested in is Malta Devices, which is a company out of Boston.
Right.
And what they are actually right now building is they're looking to build their first large-scale project, which will replace, think about it, it will replace a coal-fired power plant.
Okay. So, and also with these sustainable infrastructures, it's creating more jobs and sort of, job creation and skills development.
That's right.
In the transition of, low carbon economy, for example.
That's right.
And what about, the governments and businesses and communities? How do they sort of support this and develop these comprehensive projects? How are they sort of?
So so we like to invest in companies that do not require specific incentives or specific policies in place. Having said that, right, different governments do incentivize these technologies, which I think is great. In the US, for example, you have the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA,
right,
which is a $400 billion plan that one of the goals is to be able to make the infrastructure more sustainable. And so they are providing incentives for you to be able to develop more renewables, to be able to develop more hydrogen infrastructure, to be able to develop more large-scale energy storage and things like that. And so we from the venture capital side, we view those as a plus. When we invest in these companies, we invest in such a way that we believe these solutions will be economic without any sort of incentive.
Right. Okay. So they are sort of being, supported by governments. And
That's
what
right.
have you. Yeah.
Yeah. Which in my view, you actually in the short term, long term you shouldn't need them. In the short term, it's a nice thing to have.
Yes.
If you think about, for example, on the solar side, right? In the last 10 years alone, the cost of solar has dropped 90%, and that's due to larger scale. And a part of the reason why we achieved that larger scale was because there were incentives for people to buy that solar,
Exactly.
those solar panels, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Energy storage, same story. 90% drop in cost of energy storage.
Right.
Why? Because there are incentives to be able to adopt that for the customers to be able to buy that product.
I've definitely seen that in Spain.
Yep.
Noticed the difference. So we're running out of time, but what's the future for the greener economy and also for PIVA Capital? What are you going to be investing in the future?
Yeah, so three things come to mind. And so three things come to mind. There is a lot of buzz right now going on green, cheap hydrogen, right? So if you're able to produce green, cheap hydrogen at say less than $1 a kilo, that's a very good thing. And so we're looking into a few companies that are trying to do that. Number one. Number two is how can you do actually carbon capture at scale economically? So if you're able to, for example, do direct air capture at less than $100 a ton, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Number two. And then number three is I love renewables. I think that's very exciting. Solar, wind. The next big thing that's going to come up in the next few years is fusion. When exactly that's going to happen, TBD. But I think it's going to happen and it's going to be super exciting.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Ricardo, for your time today.
Thank you.
Great to learn about all these, what PIVA's investing in and what we'll keep an eye out for the future. So
Thanks, Gia.
thank you very much.
Thank you.